Ah, the memories of Miami. A Thunder Thursday from the beautiful, beautiful locale of Miami, Florida. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, and this is Thunder Thursday. I'm not in Miami. Barry Trammell's not in Miami. Eric Horn's not in Miami. Jenny Carlson is not in Miami. But Anthony Slater, our Anthony Slater, is in Miami tonight for the Thunder Miami Heat game. Anthony, how's your view and how's your day?
My day's good. My view behind me is not as good in my hotel room, but it's going good. The weather's it's not too hot. It's not too muggy here. I got a little pool time earlier, but obviously I'm here for the game, and the game is coming up in a few hours. It's an early tip. I believe it's 6 p.m. Central Time. Where you guys are at. So a TNT game too. So I'm excited. I've actually never covered a game in American Airlines Arena.
And Barry, you and I have. Jenny Carlson, however, didn't. Today, Slacker. Today, Anthony stirred up some memories of Miami. Some memories of the NBA Finals, Barry. You and I have got fond memories of it. Apparently, Kevin Durant does not.
Yeah, AC was talking to him yesterday about that, and talking about how Kevin Durant says he's put it behind him. But really, in Durant's defense, it's been a long time. I mean, think about it, guys. It's literally been 3.5 years since that NBA Finals. And
a lot of things have changed. I think that's the biggest thing.
No James Harden, no Scotty Brooks, no return to the finals. So
the injuries.
Yeah, just
LeBron James in a different locale.
LeBron James isn't even in Miami anymore. So lots has changed, and it just shows you that the time marches on in the NBA.
Time does march on. I like the fact that Anthony asked him about it. Showed a little depth of knowledge and character, Anthony. And I think, you know what else happened? You changed positions since the 2012 NBA Finals.
I have, for sure. I mean, it was a proper setting to talk about it because it was kind of strange. They practiced the last 2 days. They practiced at Georgia Tech on Tuesday, and then they actually practiced inside American Airlines Arena. He was talking in the same place that it had all went down. And it was just kind of a little bit of a strange environment, an empty arena. But, he's in that place. So
we'll get back to that, the memories of Miami here in a second. But there's a game tonight, the Heat, the Thunder. And Barry, sort of taken off on this point of things changing so much. They've changed so much now that in a way, do we still think of the Thunder as the NBA title contender the way we did immediately those days in Miami and the immediate days afterwards?
I think yes, unless you've watched them play in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, they're not playing like an elite NBA team. The defense is still way too spotty. But in general, I think most people still look upon this Thunder team as an NBA title contender if you can have one in a league in which Golden State refuses to lose. I mean, if Golden State doesn't get around to losing ever, everybody's playing for second. But otherwise, I still think the Thunder is held as one of the 5 or 6 elite franchises in the league.
Eric, the Thunder would be the number 3 seed in the West if the playoffs started today. Is that such a terrible thing?
No, it's not. Because if you look at the way that the bracket's laid out, if the Thunder gets the 3 seed, they're going to be on the opposite side of Golden State, and they wouldn't meet them until the Western Conference Finals. And that's at least 2 instances or 2 series that they get to play some ball. I mean, I guess the way that the Thunder were playing, if they entered the playoffs today, they wouldn't want to be playing Golden State. And everybody else in the West right now is lumped together fairly closely, besides Golden State, San Antonio Spurs are around 13-4, but everybody else is pretty tight. So, yeah, the Thunder would love to be a 3 seed right now, I think, considering some of the deficiencies they've had.
Jenny, Barry alluded to the problem that we actually watch these games and they don't look like it the way they're playing. Are we making too much about how the Thunder's playing right now?
Oh, I think that before they lost to Atlanta the other night, I think people were back on that good vibe of feeling about this team. They'd won, 4 straight and playing pretty well. And then in that loss to Atlanta, you start to see some of the old familiar problems creep back up. Perimeter defense, letting Jeff Teague get to the hole. Sort of that hero ball mode that Westbrook and Durant can get into. Now, Westbrook was hitting a ton of shots, so I'm not sure that I begrudge him for not throwing the ball to some of those other guys. But still, I mean, some of those issues that we see as bigger issues with this team, when those are the reasons for a loss, then I think you start to have those doubts creep back in. But clearly, they've still got two of the best players on the planet on their team. So when you start with that, you tend to start at a pretty good spot. And so, you always have to have that thought in your head. But still, this is a team that has some deficiencies. I just don't think there's any two ways around that right now.
Anthony had an excellent analysis in the paper today and more in depth online of the Thunder's defense in its small ball lineup. When you were done writing all that, what did you learn that you didn't jump off the score sheet or wasn't as visible to you before?
I mean, it's funny because, you guys, I feel like are a lot more down on him than I am right now. Jenny mentioned it a little bit, but the 4-game win streak recently I thought was really encouraging. Kevin Durant has returned and has looked really good, I think. Particularly, you talk about the film, I think he's looked pretty good defensively. And he's allowed Billy Donovan to use these small ball lineups that I think can be very deadly, which is him at the 4, Ibaka at the 5. Durant, Ibaka's the real key to it because he can switch out on guards and he can still rim protect and do everything. But Durant being able to guard big men in the post has been key. And the other night he blocked Al Horford twice on isolation post moves, didn't need any help. And Al Horford's one of the better low post guys in the league. So I think that's what I saw in the film room. And the fact that they're going to that lineup more and more every game is encouraging. I think they found something. And I actually think this team, I know what their record says right now, but I think they're in a good spot and they're starting to figure themselves out. Anthony Morrow's clearly over Kyle Singler. Donovan's figured that out, and I think he's just figured out that Kevin Durant at the 4 needs to happen more and more as the season goes on.
Why didn't he figure that out about Morrow sooner, Anthony? Eric, somebody?
Look,
I don't know.
This is my opinion. This is not what they're saying, but I think they locked Kyle Singler into 5 years, $25 million this summer. They really wanted to see what they had in him, and they gave him an extended run. And we're like, come on, they're committed to him, and they thought he could be better than he has, and he played himself to a point where, they just couldn't go with it anymore.
And I think
I was there a few weeks ago for a game, or maybe it was 10 days ago, and it was obvious to me, guys, how disgruntled people were. Oh, it was the Knicks game when Carmelo Anthony was just abusing Kyle Singler. It was so obvious the disgruntled attitude that fans had about Kyle Singler, and frankly, I think for their well-being, it's probably a good thing that Billy Donovan went ahead and pulled the trigger on Anthony Morrow getting back in.
I could get the argument for Singler, as a player. The problem I always had with it was that it was taking minutes away from Anthony Morrow, who had a clear skill that helped them, that has helped him when he's been given the shot. And the fact that took away his minutes, it made no sense.
You mean, Jenny, Carmelo was abusing Singler the way Paul Millsap was abusing Morrow the other night? Barry, where do you stand on this?
Well, everybody's in a better mood when the offense is better than the defense, but Morrow's defense is a major liability. That's a problem going forward with the Thunder. So I think Billy Donovan's going to have to be really sharp in how he uses a lot of these guys because you can't get by with extended minutes from Anthony Morrow against certain lineups. We saw it against the Hawks. The Hawks were masters at taking advantage of mismatches. And down the stretch with Morrow, DJ Augustine, there were physical mismatches that the Thunder faced, and as well as just general bad defense by some of the other guys.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw it, but during the game I thought it was kind of interesting. There was a little cat and mouse game with Donovan and Budenholzer where it wasn't right at the end, but it was when Donovan was trying to go small and he wanted to do it with Morrow and those guys out there, but he couldn't. Morrow wasn't guarding Korver well, so Donovan would bring in Robertson to guard Korver, but then Budenholzer would go to Kent Bazemore, and then he'd put Morrow back in to guard Kent Bazemore, and they just kept rotating those substitutions. It was none of them would stick with the other. It was really weird, but you could tell that he's trying to tweak things around the wing problems that the Thunder have.
And Eric, the wing problems really seem to center a lot on Anthony Morrow's offensive brilliance and his defensive liability.
And when he's hitting shots, he can kind of account for that defensive liability, but at the same time, there's some times where he's getting sucked in and he's ball watching. And it's not just him ball watching too. There are a lot of guys on the Thunder that are watching the ball go around the perimeter and they're getting sucked in, and then somebody's in the backside three on them. We saw it twice against the Pistons. We saw it against the Hawks at times, and the Hawks didn't hit on a few of them late. But Morrow, Dion Waiters, those guys that are those perimeter defenders at times are getting sucked in, and they're not staying tight on their assignments on the outside.
We're talking a lot about defense, Anthony. You're the reason for that. You broke it all down online in a film study and in the Oklahoman today. On the good side of things, you mentioned this earlier. You led your article, your analysis part of that article with it. It's Serge Ibaka and his defensive flexibility, his ability to move laterally. Sure looks a lot better than those switches they get into with Perk trying to guard the other team's point guard.
I mean, he's elite. He's such an elite level defender. You almost take him for granted at times. I know there's been fans who've been frustrated with his offense. Sometimes, he doesn't crash the glass, this or that. He may not look like he has energy at all times, but I mean, you've seen it recently. You really saw it in the Hawks game the other night. Some of them, you can have Morrow out there at times because sometimes Serge Ibaka, 4 or 5 times a game will just erase a bad defensive possession with his shot block, and then. He really, I feel more comfortable with Serge Ibaka guarding Jeff Teague on the perimeter than I'd feel with Morrow, maybe even Dion Waiters. A lot of the other Thunder options on point guards, I'd almost feel more comfortable with Serge Ibaka. That's how good he can be, as a 1 through 5 defender, really.
Another thing that stood out about your analysis, Anthony, is just how good Kevin Durant's playing defensively, Barry. Have you noticed that?
I think he's really trying, for one thing, and he's also playing tough interior. We saw him caught inside with the likes of Horford or Millsaps on Monday night and held on, held his own, made some blocks, made him work for shots. That's all you can ask. If Durant can hold up defensively in the small ball lineup, then everything changes. Then they can do all kinds of things, and that's a incredibly efficient offensive lineup. So that's a great sign for the Thunder, the way Durant played interior defense the other night.
Jenny, what about Westbrook? I mean, that we keep coming back to that, but Anthony pointed out his defensive lapses, breakdowns, if you want to call them, and I saw them too. There was a point in the game where he dove for a ball and sort of lingered on the hardwood just for a little bit, more than a little bit, in my opinion. But then there were times when he got caught in a switch. He was fronting Paul Millsap. They tried to lob the ball over his head, and lo and behold, Westbrook goes up like no point guard in the NBA could and bats the ball away. The Thunder's defensive liabilities, how much of it is just a Westbrook question?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, clearly he has to be, in my mind, he has to be more consistent defensively. As you were saying that, I was flashing to a conversation. I don't even remember where I had this conversation, but we were talking about Zach Sanchez, the OU defensive back. Zach Sanchez, of late, has either picked off a pass and taken it to the house, or he gets beat. It's all or nothing, and you run the risk when you throw at him that he might pick it off, but you also have the chance of making a big play of your own. And I sort of feel like Westbrook plays defense the same way. He may do something spectacular that, like you say, Sherm, nobody else in the NBA can do. He may, anticipate a pass, get in a passing lane quicker than anybody else can possibly get there. He may just sort of put his head down and decide, I'm stealing a ball, and he goes and gets it. I mean, he has that ability. But then there are definitely times when, Eric mentioned the ball watching earlier. I think that Westbrook gets caught in that some. So if you love that, if you love those moments where he just does something spectacular defensively, maybe the trade-off is the deficiencies. In my mind, if they could find a happy medium where he was playing more consistently, that would be much more beneficial to the Thunder because, while those moments of grandeur are big and they sometimes win ball games, man, letting guys by you like sometimes happens when you know what Westbrook can do, when you know the kind of athletic freak he is to be able to shut these guys down or slow him down more than he is. You just want maybe a little more consistency out of him defensively.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's the key to how good they can be defensively, because you can't just say, hey, Anthony Morrow, like, lock in. You need to play better defense. Like, he's just limited in that aspect. And it's the same
Right.
with Robertson. You can't say, hey, Robertson, we need you on the court, so, start hitting threes better. But the thing is with Westbrook, you can't, he has that level to go to. And if he can do it consistently, then they're just a better team. And it's within him to do.
Barry, once upon a time, the Thunder was considered an elite defensive team. Is it now?
No, it's not now, and we saw the slippage last year. It was an injury-marred year, but still, that was no excuse for the defensive leakage that we saw, especially down the stretch last season. So, no, the Thunder has to get back to that. In 2013, in 2012, the Thunder was one of the top 5 defensive teams in the league, and it's got to get back to that level, and it's got many of the same pieces that it did then. So it's just been a more of a slippage in culture and effort, I think. So they've got to get back to that.
I think one of the issues was there was the years that they were good. Thabo Sefolosha was like a pretty good three-point shooter. He hit 108 one year. He shot 40%. He was basically Andre Robertson with a three-point shot. But he slipped, and since he slipped, the Thunder haven't had a two-way wing to kind of put out in the lineup, and I think the defense has gradually gone downhill since then.
How about Dion Waiters, Eric? You see him, is there any chance he could fill that role?
It's possible. I mean, he has those lapses too, like Anthony Morrow at times, where, he'll let a guy get open on the backside, but Dion's got the best two-way capabilities of any shooting guard they have on the roster. If they're going to get the most out of their small ball lineup, it would be best if Dion Waiters could put in those defensive shifts to help Westbrook. So if Westbrook does gamble, you've got Dion waiting there to kind of body up on the guy that gets past him. Now, another thing that we didn't touch on that the Thunder are also missing from those other two teams, those 2012, 2013 teams, is Kendrick Perkins. Defensive captain's gone. And he was a big part of getting those guys set up in front of him. So if he's keeping guys in front of him accountable, is there anybody there that's doing that now?
You got Nick Collison, but he's not playing those kind of minutes and not starting off and setting the tone, and maybe not the kind of cop parked at the end of the street quite the way Perk was.
That's what I like what Eric Thread said about the accountability. Steven Adams actually is probably playing close to the same kind of defense that Kendrick Perkins. Adams' defense is very good, but it's that accountability. This is a franchise that really is not known for demanding a lot out of its stars. Kendrick Perkins would take on that role. It wasn't Scotty Brooks that was holding Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant's feet to the fire. It was Kendrick Perkins.
Whether he's on the court or not.
That's exact. He might be in the suit. He might not even be dressed out. But he's holding those guys. He wouldn't mind getting in their face, especially in the locker room, and telling them, hey, this is what you got to do to be a champion. And I think they're missing that now. I think that's what Billy Donovan was hired to do. But that takes time. It takes time for Billy to build up his credibility. He can't alienate these guys right out of the box. He's got to work towards that. I think they miss Kendrick Perkins' locker room presence.
What about, guys, I agree, but I think that, somebody like a Monty Williams or Mo Cheeks, they've got guys on that coaching staff that, I think have the respect of these guys. And if somebody needs to play bad cop, let's get after it here. I think somebody's got to tell these guys straight that, they have to do better. They can do better. It's like Anthony said, the ability is there for Westbrook on down the line with a lot of these guys to be better defensively. They're athletic enough to make it happen. They're smart enough to make it happen. And somebody needs to demand it. And if it's not going to be, I get why Steven Adams might not, still a young guy, I get that. But somebody, and I think it has to maybe fall to one of those assistants that's been a head coach that has these guys respect, to take them and say, listen, guys, we've got to be better, or this is a good team, but it's not going to be a great team unless they get some of those defensive deficiencies figured out.
I think they know it. I think Durant, like I said, since he's been back, I think he's been really good defensively. And the way he's talking, I feel like he knows that that's how he's going to get back to that, top 2, top 3 player in the league, is if he really ratchets it up defensively, because he's just as good as he's ever been offensively. But the problem is in this like 48 game season, or I mean 82 game season, 48 minutes. The problem is it's like within a game they have pockets where they kind of let it go, and sometimes the personnel around them isn't that good. Because if we look at the last 5 games, I think they've actually been pretty good defensively. They were great in Utah. They were really good against the Pistons. They had lapses the other night, but then they had, they went on an 18-3 run where they were really good defensively. So I think they sense it, but we just need to see it every night. Like the Warriors do it every night.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to what we were talking about at the start of last season. Obviously, last season gets hijacked by the injuries, but coming off that season that they had, the talk was playing games all through the year to build up where you're always pointing towards the playoffs. Improvements, focus on those little details. In fact, I think it was Perk that talked a lot about that. You've got to be focused in on those details in November, December, January. You've got to be building the trust, building the mindset, building the style that then becomes second nature once the playoffs get there. And Anthony, you bring up a great point. The Warriors do it every night. That's why they're the gold standard. That's why they won a championship, and that's why they haven't been beat yet this year. So, to me, yeah, it's there's frustration, but there's also this idea of if you want to be a champion, can you just flip it on in the playoffs? And I'm not sure that that's a foolproof strategy, especially when you've got a team like the Warriors that stands between you and even getting to the NBA Finals.
Speaking of somebody who stood between the Thunder and the NBA title, news of the week in the NBA this week, Barry, the impending retirement of Kobe Bryant. This is a guy, Barry, who in a lot of ways christened the NBA in Oklahoma City. Remember that Saturday night game he came in, played the Hornets, hit like a 28-footer right in front of the bench, an electric game. That was really the first time we knew there was a big-time opponent in town. And then the first taste of the postseason, he comes in with the Lakers 6-game series, Gasol, folks, that whole thing. So what's your Kobe Bryant legacy? You got all that stuff. You got the selfish Kobe Bryant. You got the guy who ran Shaq out of town. You got the problems in Colorado. But you have the champion and the guy who at one point was the best competitor in the game.
Well, I think you have to look at it from 2 different perspectives. If you care about the Lakers, then you look at Kobe Bryant in one way. If you're like Oklahoma City, you're a separate entity that just sees Kobe Bryant come in for a couple times a year, maybe a playoff series, you look at him differently. I think back to that first trip, I think that was like 10 days, 7 days after he scored 81 against the Raptors. Think about that. We had a guy score 81 points in an NBA game, and then a week later, he's playing here on Sheridan. So that was one of those pinch me moments of Oklahoma City's baptism into the NBA. But the thing I liked about Kobe Bryant was, regardless of what you thought of him personally, the way he conducted himself professionally, I thought was very interesting. It was good for us to see. I think it was good for the Thunder to see. We saw some of that even this week when Kevin Durant tries to take up for Kobe Bryant the criticism. Kobe Bryant says, I don't need anybody to take up for me. I let it slide off my back. I accept the criticism. I accept the praise. That's just part of it. So here at the end of his career, riding off into the sunset, if they will allow it, I think current superstars can still learn something from Kobe Bryant.
What's your Kobe Bryant takeaway, Eric?
My takeaway is one of the top 10 greatest players of all time. I'm not an old guy, but I am a guy who got to see Michael Jordan in his prime, whereas somebody a little bit younger than me might not have been able to see that Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan. To me, and the kids that I grew up with, Michael Jordan gets a pass on everything. I think that kids a little bit younger than me, or people that grew up a little bit younger than me, Kobe Bryant gets a pass on everything. So to them, Kobe's the new deity. That's Kevin Durant. To Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and these guys that are in the league now that are in their mid-20s and early 20s, Kobe Bryant's he's the end-all, be-all. He's the Michael Jordan. I love Kobe's game. I don't love that he, in a sense, hijacked the team for a couple of years in the L.A., but you can't take away what the guy accomplished in his career. And as Barry said, he's been a professional for the most part.
Anthony, I loved watching those Lakers teams. I loved what Phil Jackson and the Triangle recreated out there after doing with the Bulls. I got to admit, I didn't care too much for the way Kobe Bryant broke all that up. But I'm a bit of an older guy. What's your Kobe Bryant takeaway?
Top 10 player of all time. Maybe, some would argue top 5, second best shooting guard behind Jordan. Just bullheaded. I mean, he kind of has a little, Russell Westbrook has a little Kobe Bryant in him, I'd say. You got to respect the guy. I mean, I grew up in California at the time when, he was coming up. I was kind of rooting for the Kings more in those Lakers series. But, Kobe Bryant, one thing about Kobe Bryant, his defenders, his, fan base is so rabid. I mean, people call it, the religion of Mamba. But, even the other day with the Durant thing and, I had so many of these Kobe fans in my Twitter mentions, after Durant was talking about him, and just the way they defend that guy really shows you the impact he had and the way he played. It was almost even as he's going down, just the stubbornness of him and the competitiveness you kind of got to respect, just like you do with Westbrook.
Jenny, remember Game 6. Remember Kobe Bryant bringing the ball down the court. The defense shading toward him, Thabo Sefolosha on him, forces him to miss. What do you remember about Kobe?
You're right. That 81-point game that was mentioned. I can't remember. I guess maybe when he retired, somebody was talking about that, and the first thing I thought of was he came to town right after that, and I think everyone around here thought, what if he drops more? What if he goes for 85? Could he go for 90? I mean, in those days, you just didn't know if the team that had landed in our laps was going to be able to handle Kobe Bryant as good as he was at that point. And but that was the Lakers game that we saw Kirk Snyder go and dunk all over whoever it was. I don't even remember. Von Wafer. So I mean, yeah, there was a lot about that game that was pretty memorable, and I think the thing about Kobe, it's like Kobe, it's LeBron, Jordan back in the day. I mean, you either love those guys or you hate them. I mean, when those guys come to town, you can hear it every time they do something. It's either a cheer or a boo from pretty much everybody in the stands. And so that's one of the things that kind of makes Kevin Durant unique, guys, is that he's not really having that love-hate relationship with NBA fans. I mean, sure, people don't like when he beats their team, but I don't get the sense like he's a hated villain like these other guys. It'll be interesting to see if, and he's one of those guys of that talent, does he achieve that villain status at some point? I don't know what the answer to that is, but he's not there yet, that's for sure.
The problem with that is, I mean, I go to all these road games, is you can love what Durant's doing, but the villain in the arena is Westbrook. He's yapping at fans. He just kind of handles that for Durant in some ways where, it's like, well, who cares? Because they got this psycho point guard that's yelling at everyone in the first 5 rows. So, he almost becomes the show of the villain, whereas Durant's skill is just it awes the crowd.
Yeah.
What I remember about Kobe Bryant, Barry, is the press conference after Game 6 when he walked in and said, in some very colorful language, I'm really glad to be finished with these guys. He, among all people, sort of forecasted the rise of the Thunder. He said, these guys are going to be a load, and we're lucky to be done with them. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, and then, of course, 2 years later, the Thunder took him out in his last playoff series, what's almost surely going to be his last playoff series. So, yeah, he saw it, and that was pre-Perk. That was Jeff Green playing power forward, for crying out loud. So.
Yeah. You mentioned it right there. A couple cool Kobe Bryant connections. His last playoff game ever was in Oklahoma City. His last road game in the NBA, if he's healthy, he's going to be in Oklahoma City. And the first ever playoff game in Oklahoma City history featured Kobe Bryant.
Hey, I think those will make some pretty decent stories in the coming days, don't you?
April 11th.
December 19th.
Oh.
Yeah, get busy.
Make me do double duty. That's on you, Eric.
Hey, that's all for this edition of Thunder Thursday, but you can stay with the best coverage team every day at News OK and every morning in the Oklahoman. Remember, download the News OK app. Go to iTunes, download it, and set your inbox for Thunder. You'll get updates every time this wonderful team posts anything about your favorite team, the Oklahoma City Thunder.